Hello and welcome to all the men and women of the West. I'm Joe. Here with me is my co-host Dan.
Hello and greetings.
And this is a new style of video we decided to try out, inspired by Council of the Rings version of the Rings of Power TV series. His version has been very interesting, and we decided that we should give such treatment to Conan and Kull stories, and basically do the what if we were to make our own TV series, as the 90s Conan TV series was not very good. That said, without further ado, here is our treatment of episode 1 of a Kull the King series.
Know, O king, that in the decades before your father ruled the empire, Volusia, greatest of the 7 kingdoms, lay in ruins under the mangled heel. Mad King Gor-Na, last of the line of Illel, hither came Kull. From dreaded Atlantis, axe in hand, the greatest brigand, gladiator, and general of his age, bards sing still of his black rages and grim humors, who was destined to claim the Topaz throne for his own.
The first scene we see is of a small village of tribal people, clad in raiment made from the fur of the leopards. The people are celebrating and dancing and cheering and drinking from large drinking horns, made from the bones of their cattle. Most are dark-haired and dark-eyed. It is the middle of the night. The stars decorate the heavens, but one star shines brighter than the others. The bright, pale blue star of Valka. One man in particular, thickly bearded with long dark hair, is seen drinking deeply from his horn, with his brow heavily furrowed. He is worried. Another man approaches him. This man is Gor-Na. Gor-Na addresses the worried man.
Why do you worry so, Andrides? I have never seen a man who looks so gloomy after his wife has given birth to a son, and on such an auspicious day.
Andrides answers, "And well I should worry. It nearly killed her." Gor-Na's response is,
"Bah, you could have found yourself another woman."
Andrides, "Nay, there are none like Alcmede." Gor-Na looks at his friend with a puzzled look in response to Andrides' response. Gor-Na is soon called away by several of his tribesmen, with Andrides following them with his gaze. The chieftain of the same tribe as Andrides raises his horn to toast Valka, god of the sea and the lands, and the king of the gods, and also to toast the birth of the son of Andrides. Chieftain, "Thanks must be given to Valka for the favor he has shown us to our brother tribe and their chieftain, Gor-Na. And let us not forget the birth of the son of the mighty Andrides. Let he be as glorious and strong as his father." The tribesmen toast the dark-haired warrior, who frowns in response, for smiles don't come easily to his lips. He raises his own horns slightly, in a whisper of a salute, before bringing it to his own lips. In the not-so-distant shadows of the forest, the glint of iron can be seen as the light of the flames flickers off the metal of the weapons. The leopard-clad warriors exchange sinister smiles as they near the hapless, festive tribesmen. Gor-Na can be seen whispering with his tribesmen as the few present stealthily slink back into the shadows, exchanging their drinking horns for iron blades. Gor-Na drinks slowly, slower than most other men, wishing to keep his sobriety, so that when at last tribesman looks his way, he gives a false smile in response. Andrides is busy studying every face present with keen eyes as his wife Alcmede approaches him with their son in her arms. As he is busy studying every face present, a dark frown slowly comes over his face.
"Must you frown so on such a night? One would think you stand in the grim halls of the dead."
Andrides answers her, "It is only that as the night has progressed, more and more of Gor-Na's men seem to have faded away, as if not more than ghosts in the night." He makes another sweep of the partygoers. He then focuses on Gor-Na. Noticing him backing away, a look of realization and rage climbs its way onto his face. Andrides shouts to his people, "To arms! By Valka! We are betrayed!" A war horn is heard, a primitive one, and as one, the enemies of Andrides' tribe bursts out of the foliage. Gor-Na's warriors at their side. The two tribes converge upon the third and begin to massacre them. One of the warriors slashes at one of the women, hewing her in half. her sightless eyes gazing emptily at the moon. Cheers and screams howl in the night. Andrides, battle axe in hand, cuts apart that very man. Andrides, shouting to his men, rallies them. To me! Hew them down! As stated, he begins to rally the tribesmen, but alas, it is all in vain. Men, women, and children fall one by one. The hunters and warriors attempt to form a shield wall, but they are attacked from behind. Alcmede ducks into one of the nearby huts, shielding her babe with her body. She is noticed by one of the enemies, who attempts to press her down to the ground, tearing at her leopard skirts. His head, though, is soon hewed in half by the battle axe of Andrides. Andrides, on your feet!
We must fly from here, Andrides.
And Andrides responds, I will not turn my back to any enemy, especially Gor-Na, Snake Tongue.
But
Alcmede attempts to plead with him. Andrides, I will cut you a path. Take our son to the river. By now, there remains but a dozen warriors left alive. Andrides charges those who struck his line of warriors from behind, cutting down 3 men, one after another, with the same number of axe swings, before yelling over his shoulder, Go! Now! Alcmede takes flight, grabbing as she goes a basket, before running downhill. Down the path, she races for several minutes, wherefore she arrives at the river in question, panting. The basket is full of apples. Glancing over her shoulder, fearfully, Alcmede swiftly puts the basket in the water, then deposits her son into it, whispering to him,
remember thy kin and thy father, and avenge us, Kull.
An enemy tribesman spots her. There she is!
Submit, Alcmede!
Gor-Na shouts at her. Kull's mother unsheaths a dagger, one used for the gutting of animals. She goes to attempt to strike at Gor-Na, but one of the warriors throws his spear through her heart with little difficulty and with precise aim. Alcmede, gasping her last breaths, glares into the eyes of Gor-Na.
On Valka's crown, my son shall, with unbroken chains, snuff out your last breath, neither on these lands nor on any others.
The scene shifts to the clearing full of corpses, with the 2 tribes finishing the feast with a great many cheers and celebrations of their victory. 2 of their number, meanwhile, carrying a corpse far away through the forest and up onto the nearby cliff, soon push it off the said cliff and into the sea. The leaner one mutters to the other, 32 men he slew by his own hand. Have you ever seen a man cut down so many and with such fury?
Nay, but he was Andrides' red axe, and speaking of his axe, I shall say there be strong magic within, and thus I say it is to be my prize.
The scene cuts to the Pictish Isles. There, a boy of 5 stares past the foliage. About his neck hangs a necklace of jaguar teeth. He has dusky skin and long hair. Kneeling beside him is his father, Kremu. Kremu hisses to him, spear in hand.
You shall have to strike first, and you will only have 1 strike. Ere it kills you, I shall chase it from its nest, but you must strike it down. Understood, Brule? Yes, father.
The boy is as calm as he could be. Kremu sneaks stealthily through the foliage, as calm as a jaguar on the prowl. Kremu's spear flashes through the air of the early morning. A startled cry and roar echoes across the jungle as a not yet full-grown leopard leaps out of the trees towards Brule. Where most boys might shrink, cower, or hesitate, Brule does not. With a roar that brings to mind a once caged lion newly unleashed, he strikes out with his own spear, stabbing the beast through the throat. The leopard takes a swipe at the boy in spite of the small spear that has gouged its way through its throat, striking with its grisly claws. But Brule is faster, letting go of his spear, leaping back when suddenly a spear stroke pierces the feline's heart from behind. It is from Kremu. The warrior stands on a nearby branch. With a grunt, Kremu descends from the tree, approaches and kneels down, pulling out his son's spear and his own from the carcass, only to then scowl at the boy.
Never let your spear go unless you intend to throw it, and even then, you must not allow your enemy to survive such a blow.
Brule's blue eyes flash with anger.
If I were to keep hold of my spear, then its claws would have gouged me. And well, they should have. Only cowards let go of their weapons, and only cowards make excuses for their folly. And you are no coward, or am I mistaken?
Brule answers.
No, father. Good. Next time, I will not save you, and you will not make excuses.
Kremu walks past his son, hardly looking at him, the leopard thrown over his shoulder, and his spear in the other hand. Brule, for his part, sighs in frustration, only for something to catch his attention, and for him to stare past the foliage and into the shadows, where a pair of small feline eyes stare back at him. Those eyes blink first. Cut to a she-tiger that is staring down at the mewling baby Kull. She studies him for some time, with several of her kittens a short distance behind her. She soon leans closer to him, taking several sniffs, before at last laying down one lick upon his brow. Understanding that the newborn is hungry, she soon steps forth so that he is level with her chest, and that he may suckle from her, in a manner reminiscent of Romulus and Remus suckling upon the she-wolf that found them. Cut to 7 years later. It is in the early hours of the morn, in the jungle, where a young 13-year-old Amra is speaking insistently to another of the tribe's warriors.
I say to you, I have seen it. There is a boy by the river eating with the tigers.
The first hunter says to him, "The tigers do not raise boys, they devour them." And the second hunter says,
Could be a child of the striped goddess.
Hunter 1, "But she never takes a man for a mate." Hunter 2,
I am not so certain. Remember Andrides? I have heard tell that he was once her mate.
Hunter 1, irritated, "And I have told you that is mere superstition." At this moment, Gor-Na interrupts them.
We are moving the settlement. That is if you three are quite finished gossiping like a woman.
Amra's response is,
But I saw him.
Gor-Na, with a startled look, turns to glance at Amra.
Of what do you speak of, Amra? The boy, the tiger cub boy. I have seen him.
At these words, one of the hunters looks apologetically to the chieftain. The first one, the hunter in question, grunts, "He's been muttering that since he went to fetch water from the river." Gor-Na's answer is,
Stifle that noise. You will take 2 others and head down there. It could be one of the southern tribe boys.
The hunters make their way east through the foliage, 2 with a spear, the third with a great axe in hand. They arrive at the mouth of the river to find the bones of an antelope. Inspecting it, they discover it to be freshly eaten. From the nearby shadows, a pair of dark, burning eyes look upon them. Not far from those eyes, the tigress turns away, preferring to head deeper into the jungle, aware of the danger these men can pose. The youthful human eyes, though, never leave the trio of hunters. He goes to follow after his mother when one of the hunters detects the movement. Raising his head up suddenly, the man in question approaches the foliage at a slow pace, hardly daring to breathe. Gathering his courage, he strikes out with his spear into the shadows, only to discover nothing there. From up above him drops a shadow, armed with a large, if rather pointed, rock. Cut to a close-up of the horrified faces of the 2 hunters as they look up away from the corpse of the animal they were hunting and freeze as they hear the cries of their fellow tribesmen that is abruptly cut short. The 2 men are left gaping. When we ourselves look up, we find the throat of the dead hunter gouged along with his eye. The boy and the spear are no longer to be seen. Hesitantly, the 2 warriors approach the body of their comrade, the one with the battle axe leaning down to mutter,
A demon.
The scene changes. Later that evening, as a small kiln made of stones and animal bones is completed near the village settlement, the 2 hunters standing before Gor-Na, reporting the situation to him, cringe as he grunts in his deep voice.
Demon? A demon? Speak sense, you fools.
He is interrupted by Amra, who has been eavesdropping.
It was him, the tiger boy. I told you.
Be quiet, boy!
Never you mind the fool. Come hither, boy.
Amra steps forward.
How old are you, Amra? 13, chieftain. How would you like to prove your courage and become one of our hunters? I should like that very much.
You cannot be serious, Gor-Na!
Entirely serious, and I shall accompany him. It cannot be worse than entrusting this matter to you bungling fools. How do you intend to hunt him? Hunt? I have no intention of hunting him.
This response puzzles those around him. The scene changes to the Pictish Isles, where a 12-year-old Brule can be seen practicing his spear throws on a nearby tree, while his father, Kremu, sits by the animal skin tent of the chieftain. The chieftain is an elderly Pict by the name of Sidhu, and he and Kanu are in the middle of a conversation in regards to the state of their tribe and the current state of affairs on the matter of Volusia. Kanu is plump and old, whereas Sidhu is thin. The king has passed, as they all seem to, rather suddenly. with the new king having imparted the gifts you see to us in the hopes of aid against Western pirates.
Puzzling one.
He examines the silver chalice and other silver dishes before him.
This is quite the donation for our tribe to assist in the hunt for petty pirates and brigands, or is this intended for all the tribes allied with us?
At this question, Kanu sports a devious grin with a glint in his eyes. Oh no, I suspect that what he truly wishes is for the 13 tribes to send their finest warriors to shield him. Though he hides it well, he bore the expression of a hunted deer when last I saw him. Kremu, who had been examining a silver coin, with a lean face on one side and a flying dragon on the other. He says with a scowl on his face,
What you mean to tell us, wise Kanu, is that nothing has changed at all. What difference makes it who sits upon their throne if they be nothing more than a mere front for the snake men?
The three are interrupted from their brooding discussion by a series of loud acclamations and cheers as Brule turns to his father.
I have done it, father. 10 spear throws have managed to pierce through front and back of the center of the tree. 10 more.
Kanu attempts to mollify his friend. Do you not think that you might be demanding too much from him? Kremu snaps back.
At his age, I had to do 10 times that many spear throws with that degree of perfection.
Sidlu.
And yet that very same precision did little to save your father, Kremu. It takes more than that to make a fine warrior.
It takes wits. Kremu grunts back.
Wits my son has aplenty, but what my son needs is a firm hand to mold him into all that he can be.
Kremu, once he is satisfied, returns his attention back to the elders in order to converse with them further.
We ought to maintain a wary eye. This could well be a trap.
Kanu snickers a little. I see your own wits are as swift as your spear. I noticed the vast gifts given by Gor-Na to the other Pictish ambassadors. Some spoke to him in private far longer than I dare say we should maintain an eye on the other tribes, and upon those not part of the 13-tribe alliance. Kremu speaks sharply.
We ought to keep an equally scrutinous gaze on the Atlantean tribes.
Brule can be seen eyeing the three old men from the corner of his eye, just before he focuses once more on the tree trunk in front of him, throwing his spear with perfect aim. Just as the spear strikes true, the scene cuts to a dark night, and where meat can be seen roasting on a campfire. Amra and Gor-Na are seated on different sides of the said fire. Confused by the lack of action on the part of the elder, Amra asks him,
I do not see how this will lure out the tiger boy.
Gor-Na replies coldly,
You will, for no youth can resist his desires.
As he is speaking, from the foliage, gazing at them, is the youth in question. He stares at them uncomprehending, unable to understand why they are merely sitting there. He fingers his newly acquired spear. Little does he realize that he is falling into Gor-Na's trap. With Gor-Na's eyes on the flames, he mutters to himself.
This reminds me of a night, years ago, near the very valley you discovered this wild youth.
Amra asks of him.
What night? Was it centuries ago?
Gor-Na snaps at him.
Of course not, you dullard, but it was a good memory.
Gor-Na takes note of the nearby boy approaching them with his spear held at the ready and a gleam in his eyes. Gor-Na orders Amra.
Hand him a hunk of the deer.
Amra gets nervous.
Me? And why do we have to share our meat with him?
Gor-Na says scornfully.
Because I need both arms to seize him and disarm him.
Amra responds.
Will the plan work? He just heard you say it.
Gor-Na replies confidently.
Of course it will. He is more beast than man, and he can hardly grasp our words.
At these words, the boy grabs at the smoked meat, sniffs it, and looks at Amra eating another piece of the meat. The boy, then realizing what it is, devours greedily the food that was handed to him. Before he is finished, Gor-Na makes his move, after slinking behind the boy quietly with his own spear at the ready. The boy soon takes note of the trap, and before he can turn around, Gor-Na, who is faster and spear in hand, cuts down the head of the boy's spear. Wherefore he attempts to grab at it, only for the child to bite into his wrist. Gor-Na cries out in pain and in a rage punches the child, loosening risking some of his teeth, with Gor-Na launching a series of blows, knocking the child unconscious. Amra attempts to stop him, calling out his name. He is thrown aside as Gor-Na continues to unleash his wrathful blows upon the unconscious boy. After a couple of minutes, he stops, while huffing and puffing like a worn animal. Gor-Na snarls at the hurt Amra.
Rope, you idiot!
Amra goes for the rope and presents it to Gor-Na, who swiftly binds the child's wrist and ankles, with Amra asking of him in a hushed tone,
Who is he? Who are his parents?
Gor-Na says quietly and yet thoughtfully,
That I do not know. Likely came from further downstream from the south, but he is swift and already blooded.
Picking the boy up, he takes him away from the clearing. The next scene shows the boy bound to the pole in the middle of the settlement. Snarling, he is suspicious of all those around him. One of the women asks of Gor-Na, Who is he? Where did you find him? Amra answers excitedly,
I did. I may not be one to boast, but I aided in capturing him.
Gor-Na scornfully says,
The empty-headed fool did nothing.
Amra deflates, looking hurt and annoyed, as one of the women asks uncertainly,
What is to be done with him?
And a hunter says, We ought to kill him, or feed him to the tigers. And the hunter with the battle axe replies,
But they are his kin. Likely they will free him and come at us with a vengeance.
Another hunter asks, What is to be done, Gor-Na? Gor-Na studies the boy, recalling the memory of a woman calling a baby Kull, and he smiles.
Ask of our brother tribes if they have misplaced a child. If not, then we claim him as our own.
One of our own? But, says one of the hunters,
The youth is no older than 4 or 5 summers, and he is already blooded. Imagine him fighting for our tribe. When full grown,
a woman comments, I can only think one of us will have to take care of him. He must be mute. Are we to teach him our ways? And what are we to call him? Amra says eagerly,
I can teach him to speak. May we keep him, mother?
Gor-Na says mockingly,
Kull. We shall call him Kull.
The scene moves forward to 7 years later. There are screams and battle cries and blood spilt everywhere as Gor-Na's tribe strikes at its enemies. A Lemurian pirate crew are in the midst of being pushed back to their boats. The Lemurians leap onto the boats, half their numbers left in the valley where the shoreline is. Leaving, one of the Lemurians looks up past the warriors to the beach, where one of the few female crew members has washed ashore and is kneeling beside one of the Lemurian corpses with a grief-stricken look in her eyes. She is soon caught by Gor-Na and some other women who recognize her as one of their own, whereupon an argument breaks out among them. Not that she pays them any mind, stricken with grief for her fallen husband, a Lemurian pirate. Kull, though, pays them no mind, and simply stares out at the sea. His eyes are far away. Noticing his entranced look, Amra calls out his name and shakes him, asking him,
What is the matter, Kull?
The sea. It has never looked as it does today.
It is the sea. What of it?
I never knew it could look and sound so apart from all else. I have never felt thus since I ran with my mother and my brothers and sisters in the jungle. Far away from the warriors, Gor-Na calls out to them, praising their courage and telling the men to continue with the hunt as they were. All are free to proceed as they please, save Kull, who stares at the sea. It feels as though Valka himself is calling me out to the sea. The scene cuts to a campfire on a cliff where Gor-Na, Amra, and Kull are seated facing one another, with Kull visibly unimpressed and displeased with Gor-Na and Amra visibly irritated. The sun was setting. A last crimson glory filled the land and lay like a crown of blood on the snow-sprinkled peaks. The three men who watched the death of the day breathed deep the fragrance of the early wind which stole up out of the distant forests and then turned to a task more material. One of the men was cooking venison over a small fire, and this man, touching a finger to the smoking viand, tasted with the air of a connoisseur.
Already, Kull. Gor-Na, let us eat. Good,
said he. I am hungry.
When were you ever otherwise?
Jeered the first speaker. When I am fighting, Kull answered seriously. The other shot a quick glance at his friend as to fathom his inmost mind. He was not always sure of his friend.
And then you are blood hungry,
broke in the older man.
Amra, have done with your bantering and cut us food.
Night began to fall. The stars blinked out. Over the shadowy hill country swept the dusk wind. Far off, a tiger roared suddenly. Gor-Na made an instinctive motion toward the flint-pointed spear which lay beside him. Kull turned his head, and a queer light flickered in his cold gray eyes. "The striped brothers hunt tonight," said he.
They worship the rising moon.
Amra indicated the east, where a red radiance was becoming evident. "Why?" asked Kull. "The moon discovers them to their prey and their enemies."
Once, many hundred of years ago, a king tiger pursued by hunters called on the woman in the moon, and she flung him down a vine, whereby he climbed to safety and abode for many years in the moon. Since then, all the striped people worship the moon,
said Gor-Na. "I don't believe it," said Kull bluntly. "Why should the striped people worship the moon for aiding one of their race who died so long ago? Many a tiger has scrambled up Death Cliff and escaped the hunters, but they do not worship that cliff. How should they know what took place so long ago?" Gor-Na's brow clouded.
It little becomes you, Kull, to jeer at your elders or to mock the legends of your adopted people. This tale must be true because it has been handed down from generation unto generation, longer than men remember. What always was must always be.
"I don't believe it," said Kull. "These mountains always were, but someday they will crumble and vanish. Someday the sea will flow over these hills."
Enough of this blasphemy,
cried Gor-Na, with a passion that was almost anger.
Kull, we are close friends, and I bear with you because of your youth. But one thing you must learn: respect for tradition. You mock at the customs and ways of our people, you whom that people rescued from the wilderness and gave a home and a tribe.
"I was a hairless ape roaming in the woods," admitted Kull frankly and without shame. "I could not speak the language of men, and my only friends were the tigers and the wolves. I know not whom my people were, or what blood am I."
That matters not,
broke in Gor-Na.
"For all you have the aspect of one of that outlaw tribe who lived in Tiger Valley and who perished in the Great Flood. It matters little. You have proven yourself a valiant warrior and a mighty hunter. Where will you find a youth to equal him in throwing the spear or in wrestling?"
broke in Amra, his eyes alight.
"Very true,"
said Gor-Na.
"He is a credit to the Sea Mountain tribe, but for all that he must control his mouth and learn to reverence the holy things of the past and of the present."
"I mock not," said Kull without malice, "but many things the priests say I know to be lies, for I have run with the tigers, and I know wild beasts better than the priests. Animals are neither gods nor fiends, but men in their way without the lust and greed of man."
"More blasphemy!"
cried Gor-Na angrily.
"Man is Valka's mightiest creation."
Amra broke in to change the subject.
"I heard the coast drums beating early in the morning. There is a war on the sea. Volusia fights the Lemurian pirates. Evil luck to both,"
grunted Gor-Na. Kull's eyes flickered again. "Volusia, land of enchantment. Someday I will see the great city of wonder."
"Evil the day that you do,"
snarled Gor-Na.
"You will be loaded with chains, with the doom of torture and death hanging over you. No man of our race sees the great city safe as a slave." "Evil luck attend her,"
muttered Amra.
"Black luck and a red doom,"
exclaimed Gor-Na, shaking his fist towards the east.
"For each drop of spilt Atlantean blood, for each slave toiling in their cursed galleys, may a black blight rest on Volusia and all the 7 empires."
Amra fired, leapt lithely to his feet, and repeated part of the curse. Kull cut himself another slice of cooked meat. "I have fought the Volusians," said he, "and they were bravely arrayed, but not hard to kill, nor were they evil-featured."
"You fought the feeble guard of our northern coast,"
grunted Gor-Na.
"or the crew of stranded merchant ships. Wait until you have faced the charge of the Black Squadron, or the great army as have I. Then there is blood to drink. With Gondaro of the Spear, I harried the Volusian coast when I was younger than you, Kull. We carried the torch and the sword deep into the Empire. 500 men we were, of all the coast tribes of Atlantis. 4 of us returned. Outside the village of Hawks, which we burned and sacked, the van of the Black Squadron smote us. There the spears drank and the swords were eased of thirst. We slew and they slew, but when the thunder of battle was stilled, 4 of us escaped from the field, and all of us sore wounded.
Escalante tells me, pursued Kull, that the walls about the Crystal City are 10 times the height of a tall man, that the gleam of gold and silver would dazzle the eyes, and the women who throng the streets or lean from their windows are robed in strange smooth robes that rustle and sheen.
Escalante should know,
grimly said Gor-Na,
since he was slave among them so long that he forgot his good Atlantean name, and must forsooth abide by the Volusian name they gave him. He escaped,
commented Amra.
Aye, but for every slave that escapes the clutches of the 7 empires, 7 are rotting in dungeons and dying each day, for it was not meant for an Atlantean to bide as a slave. We have been enemies to the 7 empires since the dawn of time,
mused Amra,
and will be until the world crashes,
said Gor-Na with a savage satisfaction.
For Atlantis, thank Valka, is the foe of all men.
Amra rose, taking his spear and prepared to stand watch. The other 2 lay down on the sward and dropped to sleep. Of what did Gor-Na dream? Battle, perhaps? Or the thunder of buffalo? Or a girl of the caves? Kull, through the mists of his sleep, echoed faintly and far away the golden melody of the trumpets. Clouds of radiant gold floated over him. Then a mighty vista opened before his dream self. A great concourse people stretched away into the distance, and a thunderous roar in a strange language went up from them. There was a minor note of steel clashing, and great shadowy armies reigned to the right and the left. The mist faded, and a face stood out boldly, a face above which hovered a regal crown, a hawk-like face, dispassionate, immobile, with eyes like the gray of the cold sea. Now the people thundered again.
Hail the king!
Hail the king! Kull the king! Kull awoke with a start. The moon glimmered on the distant mountain. The wind sighed through the tall grass. Gor-Na slept beside him, and Amra stood, a naked bronze statue against the stars. Kull's eyes wandered to his scanty garment. A leopard's hide twisted about his pantherish loins. A naked barbarian. Kull's cold eyes glimmered. Kull the king. Again he slept. They arose in the morn and set out for the caves of the tribe. The sun was not yet high when the broad blue river met their gaze, and the caverns of the tribe rose to view.
Look!
Amra cried out sharply.
They burned someone!
A heavy stake stood before the caves. Thereon was a young girl bound. The people who stood about hard-eyed showed no sign of pity.
Allah,
said Gor-Na, his face setting into unbending lines.
She married a Lemurian pirate, the wanton.
Aye, broke in a stony-eyed old woman. My own daughter, that she brought shame on Atlantis. My daughter no longer. Her mate died. She was washed ashore when their ship was broken by the craft of Atlantis. Kull eyed the girl compassionately. He couldn't understand, why did these people, her own kin and blood, frown on her so, merely because she chose an enemy of her race? In all the eyes that were centered on her, Kull saw only one trace of sympathy. Amra's strange blue eyes were sad and compassionate. What Kull's own immobile face mirrored, there is no knowing, but the eyes of the doomed girl rested on his. There was no fear in her fine eyes, but a deep and vibrant appeal. Kull's gaze wandered to the faggots at her feet. Soon the priest, who now chanted a curse beside her, would stop and light these with the torch which he now held in his left hand. Kull saw that she was bound to the stake with a heavy wooden chain, a peculiar thing which was typically Atlantean in its manufacture. He could not sever that chain, even if he reached her through the throng that barred his way. Her eyes implored him. He glanced at the ropes, touched the long dagger at his girdle. She understood, nodded, relief flooded her eyes. Kull struck as suddenly and unexpectedly as a cobra. He snatched the dagger from his girdle and threw it. Fairly under the heart it struck, killing her instantly, while the people stood spellbound. Kull wheeled, bounded away, and ran up the sheer side of the cliff for 20 feet like a cat. The people stood, struck dumb. Then a man whipped up bow and arrow and sighted along the smooth shaft. Kull was heaving himself over the lip of the cliff. The bowman's eyes narrowed. Amra, as if by accident, lurched headlong into him, and the arrows sang wide and aside. Then Kull was gone. He heard them screaming on his track. His own tribesmen, fired with the bloodlust, wild to run him down and slay him for violating their strange and bloody code of morals. But no man in Atlantis, and that means no man in the world, footed with Kull of the Sea Mountain tribe. I hope you enjoyed this video and that you have a good idea of how we would have done this first episode. Quick shout out before we close the video to DJ Malfunction for editing this video. He's done amazing work here, so gotta give all the credit for the visuals here. And of course to Jasper Lane for recommending him. So if you enjoyed this video, and do feel free to smash that like and that subscribe button as though you were Kull, who had just freshly smashed his enemies with the axe by which he rules.